There you go.
Good.
All right. So good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Did anybody else have a difficulty getting into the Zoom? Yes, everybody did.
Yeah.
No, it just took a little while longer than it usually did, but like by half a second.
You're right. There's a glitch because something is set up wrong. It doesn't. Okay, good. John knows all about it. Good. So we're wrapping up a little bit the Mishnah that we've been spending some time on, and I think it's worth it. The different options, the different suggestions, different opinions people have about the good path that a person should try to cling to in life. And we talked about each of them. And I want to revisit, well, first we'll come to the end, and I want to revisit the beginning. So the end of this is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked his students for their opinions, right? And then we have them listed. And then he responds after he hears the 5 opinions, right? So he said to them, let's just read that last line or so. So who'd like to read the translation that is pretty much in line with what most of us have?
I'll read it.
All right.
Where are we? What number?
And 13. The end of Mishnah 13, chapter.
Said he to them, I prefer the answer of Elazar ben Arak, for his view includes all of yours.
Right. Okay. So he says, I think his view is the best. He gives a reason why he thinks so. Any other translations that could shed some light on this?
For once, Rabbi Shapiro is basically the same, slightly different words, but it's the same thing.
Let's hear those slightly different words.
Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar ben Arak, for his words include your words.
Look at that. I think there's a plagiarism case here that's potentially somebody could file. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing that there's such a good overlap between the two translations. So I would like for us to all think about 2 things or whatever. He gives his opinion. He likes Rabbi Elazar ben Arak better than the others. He gives the reason. So let's try to understand that reason. In what way does Rabbi Elazar ben Arak's words include everybody else's? How could we unpack that a little bit? Then I want to go back to the question that we touched on, and I don't remember what we actually said. Why is he asking everybody for their own separate opinions? Why doesn't he, as we've had in the past, why doesn't he just say what he thinks? Why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai simply teach us his views on life? Pirkei Avot is that's what it is. It keeps on giving us sages who teach us what they think. So why has he put this out to his students? And of course, at the end, he then wraps it up. He says what he prefers. He doesn't simply say, Yasher Koach, you've all done a really good job, trying to think things through. And then, of course, why is Rabbi Elazar ben Arak's statement the inclusive statement of all the rest? So those are the questions that I have. So please, I invite anybody to weigh in wherever you want. Josie.
Well, Rabbi Shapiro's note on the last line, his words include your words, says, a good heart desires only what is right and true for both self and other, and thus includes the best traits of all the rest.
Okay.
So Rabbi ben Zakkai is saying these are the best of the suggestions or the answers because it's not only me, it's you.
Right. Well, of course, if we look back at the other suggestions, one says being a good friend. So that's certainly not just me, it's also you. One person says being a good neighbor. That's certainly not just me, it's also you. One person says a generous perspective, ayin tova, a good eye, which seems to be that kind of idea. The one that sees consequences of their acts, we talked about that, and we also talked about that as being, it's not just about you. How does this affect everybody else, right? So actually, all of them seem to be concerned with other people, as well as with saying, you want to be a good person, you can't just be a good person in isolation. It has to be within the social interpersonal world. So in a certain sense, everybody is sort of saying that. So, and then it comes back to our question. So why is a good heart so much more inclusive?
I hate to say this because I'm not sure the rabbis normally thought in this way, but
maybe abnormally.
From a modern perspective, I guess you could say that it's looking at the emotional component of good behavior. We talked a little bit about that, I think, last time, in referencing Himmler and his refusal to pay attention to emotional kinds of stuff. That seems to be the only possibility that I can think of, that the emotions, not in a sentimental way, but in terms of deep feeling, really would necessarily encompass the good of the community, of the people with whom one associates. But in answer to your earlier question about why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is asking these people's opinion at all, again, I'm not sure that the rabbis would have thought in this way, but it's a very Socratic way of going about it. You propound a question, or you ask the students what their views are. Socrates got a little snarky about that, and certainly Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is not being snarky, but it's a way of getting students involved. Again, this is a modern perspective, and I really don't know what it doesn't sound like that's what they had in mind, but that's all I can think of.
Right. So it sort of brings up the question of, was this Socratic method, to use that term, right? Was this Socratic, his normal approach? Is this the way he taught Torah generally? Or is this specific to this particular topic? In general, I mean, we have him being very apodictic, right? He says back on Mishnah 9, right? If you've learned a lot of Torah, don't think you're such, hot stuff. So that's not so Socratic. Yeah. He's just telling you what he thinks. So here that he doesn't do that, we don't have enough material to go on. But the question is it specifically here that he chose to take this approach, or was this his usual pedagogical method? But as you say, it certainly tries to get people to think and to grapple with what's going on. If we're talking about this is specific to this topic, then in a certain sense it could make sense that it's specific to this topic, because he's not asking, okay, what are the 4 ways that a pot can get treif, or what are the whatever. This is not information. This really is about, hey, what do you guys think about, what does it mean to lead a good life? What do each of you think about this? Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe he just realizes it's a complex subject and he himself doesn't have all the answers. When I was a student teacher, especially of history, but when we dealt with really sensitive race stuff to a class that's half Black, I used to ask, how do you interpret this? Because I really don't have the privilege of saying how to. And that's not going to be the case with him. It's not that he's not in the same boat with everyone else, but maybe he is humble enough to think that his students actually have a better answer than he does, or a more comprehensive answer.
So I think there's a difference. He is definitely equally human and needs to be, just as much challenged with how to live a good life. So obviously everybody has their own specific problems and opportunities and obstacles. So the case that you mentioned with your class, it's absolutely the right thing. You know, you people sitting there are living a life that I'm not living. You have to tell me what's going on. So that's a legitimate and the ethical thing to do. So maybe he's modeling that. Maybe in this case, he's modeling the idea that, yeah, you have to, specifically this emphasis on other people, right? That in the end, the good life needs to be with a recognition of yourself within the society that you live or within the group that you're interacting in. So he's implicitly modeling that answer by starting out by, instead of giving a sermon, you know, we should all really be attentive to everybody else, right? He lives it, and he engages this in this conversation. Part of this is to go back to Bill's you know, speculation. This has always been one of the concerns of the rabbinic community, whether they use contemporary psychological terminology or not, on a different level. The concern has always been, how do you not just simply create learned people, how do you create people? Right? How do you make sure that the person is a mensch? How do you make sure that the person not just knows their, you know, their alepphs and through their toughs, but you know, how do you make sure that they have what we had in our Torah reading last week and this week, that they have the heart, that they have the you know, and that's in a certain sense what when Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says Leiv Tov, it's like bingo. That's exactly what Moshe is talking about again and again and again in Deuteronomy. So with that heart, all the other, how does it include, I would suggest, how does it include everybody else's answer? It's not just about being concerned with other people, but each of these answers says to be concerned with other people. But then how do you do it?
That's right.
How do you act as a good neighbor? How do you act as a good friend? How do you act, you know, with a kind of an open eye and a not judgmental, perhaps, eye? So Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says, you need a good heart. You have to cultivate a good heart. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't give us, you know, 12 steps toward a good heart. You know, it would be nice to, you know, to have that little manual. But he says that's the goal. And that's the metric, that's the criterion that you should use when you're thinking about how and what to work on for yourself. I wanna, okay, yeah, Bill.
No, I was just gonna say that seems to be, and I agree with you, but I think that's a very modern perspective. We say oftentimes in affairs of the heart, but even in respect to following a career choice, to follow your heart. What you're assuming you're a decent person in general, if you follow your heart, that will give you the clue to how to behave, to how to act.
So okay, so that clarifies things. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, because what Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says is your heart is not automatically good. You have to try to make a good heart. If I follow my heart, then unfortunately the quote that I can think of is Woody Allen saying, you know why I want to sleep with my stepdaughter? Because the heart wants what it wants. Yeah. So that's almost a direct quote of what he said. Yeah. And, you know, it just stuck with me as such a horrifying.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Cluelessness of what it means to be a human being. So that's a good heart, as I said, because he doesn't give us the breakdown. But it's not just follow your heart. It means follow your heart
on the right path.
Work on your heart to make it a good heart. Yeah, Jen.
So just a question. It seems to me that, okay, I've said before that I have issues with empathy, and I mean, isn't the way to get there to okay, I don't actually like this person, but I will try to be a good neighbor to them anyway. Yeah. I can't stand my cousin, but I will try to, you know, treat them well anyway. So it's like, I feel like all the other answers were the way to get to having a good heart.
So you're flipping it around, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, or, you know, you can say just trying to practice a lot of the mitzvot will help you try to, you know, have a big heart. So I feel like the other answers are a little more practical in a way.
Yeah, I mean, they give an identifiable context. I'm your neighbor. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of, you know, noise? What does it mean in terms of garbage? What does it mean in terms of boundaries and so on? Yeah, it gives you a much more concrete setting. Yeah, so I think that you're right. It goes both ways. And here's where I would actually add the next step of what it is. Like you said, you're gonna try to be a good neighbor, even if you don't like the person and so on. So this is not necessarily a Pollyannish prescription. It's not have a good heart and then the world will be just a wonderful world. And so that's why what I would suggest is that having a good heart is really encompassing, because having a good heart is, you're going to need it when you try to be a good neighbor and it still ends up, you know, being a lousy situation. You're going to try to be a good friend and there's still going to be some kind of disappointment or pain. You can't control the other person. You take the other person into consideration, but you don't know how it's going to work out. And you don't know, you're human. Maybe by accident, you make some kind of mistake that doesn't work out. How do you persist in all of these other things, you know, without saying, well, I tried it and it doesn't work, so forget it. I'm out of here.
Well, so that goes back to the lesson of the Gita, that you do what you can do, and then but the fruits of your actions aren't in your hands. So whatever happens after that happens, and that's just a matter of learning to accept that, which is a lifelong process. But
so learning to accept that can be on different levels. You can just have a grim stoic acceptance of this. No, seriously, you can say, you know, this really is no fun, but this is the imperative that I'm committed to. Or you can try to have a good heart.
Well, like one leads to the other.
To have a good heart goes a little bit further than to simply saying, no, here's the acceptance of my responsibility.
Yeah, but if you're accepting it for God and you have any kind of somewhat devotion, then, you know, you at least have a reason. I still think that's the way that leads to the good heart. I guess it can work in either way. Maybe you can wonderfully get a good heart first. God bless those people. But for some of us, maybe it's easier to work on the actions you're doing and make sure those are as right as you can make them. And then you kind of go from there.
Absolutely. None of the other opinions are rejected, right? They're not rejected. They're simply said by Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai to be subsumed within this overarching idea. There's a classic story told about one of the early Hasidic heroes, Reb Zusha of Anapol. So he was this very simple, humble man, and the story is told, and he's sort of at the beginning of the rise of the Hasidic movement, and the story is told about some followers, you know, early Hasidim who really got excited about trying to do this, but they have trouble. You know, they're trying their best, but it doesn't give them joy. It doesn't give them a sense of fulfillment. They're dirt poor. They're struggling. Their life is difficult. So they go to the Rebbe and they say, help us out here. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we just feel anguish and disappointment, and you know, what can we do? So the Rebbe says, you know what? You have to talk to Reb Zusha.
To a what?
You have to go talk to Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha wasn't a Hasidic master. He was a guy who sat in the corner. So he said, he can help you with this. Ask him. He has nothing in his life. He has, you know, he's totally impoverished, and nevertheless, he's able to overcome all of that. So why don't you go to Reb Zusha? Maybe Reb Zusha can give you the answer. So they go over to Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha is sitting there studying, and he sees two people are coming over. They want to talk to him. So he says, yeah, hi. That's what he said. He said, hi. They say the Rebbe sent us over to you because our problem is we are so destitute. Everything is a struggle for us. We can't make ends meet. We have families. And everything we try to do is such, it's so difficult. How do we do it? And the Rebbe said that you know how to do this. And Reb Zusha said, I don't know why the Rebbe sent you over to me. I don't have any problems. So that was his answer. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. Overcoming difficult. No, this is life, and I just go along. So I don't know if it helped them too much, but that's the story. So yeah, Josie.
Talk about being a good neighbor. I think if you really want to see the challenges of being a neighbor, to live in an apartment building where you can't just shut yourself away. The minute you step out of your little apartment, you're involved with your neighbors, whether you want to be or not.
Even if you don't step out of your apartment.
Well, sometimes, yes.
You've got a ceiling on top of you,
right?
And you've got walls all around you, right?
Noise, yeah.
So yeah, and you've got the neighbor underneath you. It's like with the lulav, right? When that's what we do. We shake the lulav in all the directions of the neighbor, right? So I want to just add one more point, and that is the Hebrew is translated, I prefer, right? Something like that. That's what people have said, right? I prefer the words of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. In the Hebrew, the word is ro'eh. I see the words of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, and the implications, I see his as the best, right? I see that his answer is the more encompassing one. We have the word see in this coming week's Torah reading. It's the beginning of the Torah. Hey, look, see, take this in. So in that respect, I want to add the idea of accepting this. If we look back at the one of, the more enigmatic of all of these statements is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, what's the path, the good path that a person should try to lead in life? Haro'eh et hanolad. Right? So there's that word again. And the translation that we've had, if you go backwards, Geraldine, what do you have in that same Mishnah? If you go back to Rabbi Shimon's statement toward the end of the Mishnah, middle end of the Mishnah, just Rabbi Shimon.
Rabbi Shimon said foresight.
Foresight. So if that's a nice translation, it still uses the word ro'eh, to see. And what did Rabbi Shapiro have? Can't hear you.
Sorry, a good mind.
A good mind. So that's not helpful.
That's not terribly helpful.
Right. What I want to suggest is that the ro'eh has this idea of seeing and accepting. Seeing and accepting. And to a certain extent, then, what Rabbi Shimon is saying is, you're going to see consequences. And consequences, as has been pointed out, and Jen points out, you can't control those consequences. Can you see it and accept that? Can you make peace with the idea that you're not in total control of everything? So when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I see and I accept that this is the best answer. This is the best answer. The best answer is a good heart. Let's strive for a good heart. Okay, we have only a minute or two to embark on the next Mishnah, unless somebody has another comment. Okay, let's read the next Mishnah real quick, and then we'll be able to chew on it for a whole week. Who's going to read it for us? Geraldine, you got it? Go.
Rabbi Yohanan continued, Look about you and tell me which is the way in life that one should avoid. Rabbi Eliezer said, a begrudging eye. Rabbi Yehoshua said, an evil colleague. Rabbi Yossi said, an evil neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said, one who borrows and does not repay, for borrowing from a person is like borrowing from God, as it is said, the wicked borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one deals graciously and gives. From Psalm 37, line 21. Rabbi Elazar said, a begrudging heart, said he to them, I prefer the answer of Rabbi Elazar ben Arak, for his view includes all of yours.
Okay, so this is the mirror image, right, of the previous Mishnah. And what does Rabbi Shapiro give us? No,
Yeah. Sorry, Rabbi, for which, for the last one or for the
14,
whole thing?
The whole thing.
Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his disciples, look and see, what is the key to wrong action? Rabbi Elazar, an evil eye. Rabbi Yehoshua, an evil friend. Rabbi Yosei, an evil neighbor. Rabbi Shimon, one who steals under the pretext of borrowing. Every borrowing is borrowing from God, as it is said, the wicked one borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is gracious and gives. Rabbi Elazar, an evil heart. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar ben Arak, for his words include your words.
Okay. So we're going to unpack this hopefully next time. One question that we need to look at is, some of them are obvious, but that Rabbi Shimon one is, again, a kind of a curveball, right? The other one's chaver tov, chaver ra, shachen tov, shachen ra. A good one, a bad one, a good one, a bad one. But with Rabbi Shimon, it's a little different. Yes, Geraldine.
Bill says evil heart, as mine says begrudging. I find, right. What does the Hebrew?
The Hebrew says ra. Ra means bad.
It means bad.
Rabbi Hertz translates it as bad.
Right. So good. So that's the literal translation. Begrudging is already an interpretive translation.
Yeah.
And doesn't give the theme, the literary thematic of these two is tov, 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 tov.
Ra, ra, ra,
and then
ra,
ra, ra, ra, ra, not in cheering. No, not Craig. No. But bad. All right. So we'll come back to this next time. Okay. Everybody.
Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe.
I can't stop the recording.